Hi, everybody. This month's tip of the month is called the Year of Confusion, or for all of you Latin fans, it was also known as Annus Confusionis. So when I saw an article about the Year of Confusion, I thought I knew what it was about. I thought it had to do with an event that took place not that long ago, September 3rd, 1967, when in Sweden they decided that they were going to change the side that they drove on from the left side of the road to the right side of the road. And they did this because all of the other countries around them were on the right side, so they wanted to be on the same side, which would create less problems when traffic was moving from one country to another country. And you could even buy a pair of gloves to remind you that the right side of the road was green, which was go, and the left side of the road then was red, which meant no good, don't go that way. So how did it all work out? Well, not so good. And this is what I thought was the year of confusion, because it certainly looks confusing. But the actual year of confusion was 46 BC. Now, what happened in 46 BC? Well, they converted the calendar from the most current Roman calendar to the Julian calendar. Now, some of you are probably thinking, well, I don't have a tree that goes back to 46 BC. Why does this matter to me? And you probably have figured out that what I'm going to be talking about is the transition from the Roman calendar to the Julian calendar and then to the Gregorian calendar. So we're going to talk a little bit about calendars and how we got to where we are today. The Roman calendar that was used before the conversion was a 12-month calendar, but it was based on a lunar year of 355 days. So we know that this is going to be a problem because the solar year is 365 days. Well, what they tried to do was they would insert a leap month into the calendar. Sometimes this month had 22 days, sometimes it had 23 days, and they would stick it in sometime in February or March, probably when the days were shortest and it was darkest and maybe nobody realized what they were doing. But the problem was that because there was no standardization, over a long period of time, everything got out of sync. And so when they missed these months, there was a 90-day difference between where the sun was and where the calendar was. And so what they did was they transitioned from that Roman calendar to the Julian calendar. And what happened in 46 BC was they took those 90 days and they added it to the 355 days. And believe it or not, 46 BC had 445 days, the longest recorded calendar year in human history. Now, we're talking about 46 BC or 46 BCE if you're more comfortable with that. And so we converted the next year to the Julian calendar. In the Julian calendar, we start on January 1st, 45 BC, right? We're counting down because this is BC or BCE. So January 1st became the first day of the year. And what they did was they added 10 days to the calendar. They added a day to April, June, September, and November. They added 2 more days to January, August, and December. And then they kept February at 28 days. So now we had 2 different kinds of years. We had a normal year of 365 days, and we had leap years of 366 days. This sounds pretty similar to what we do now. So in a 4-year cycle, we had 3 normal years and 1 leap year. And so if we were to figure out the average over those 4 years, it would be 365 and a quarter day. Right? We have 365 for the first years, we have that extra day in the 4th year, so you take that extra day divided by 4 and you get an extra quarter of a day over the 4-year cycle. However, the solar year is not really 365 days, it's 365.24 days. And so by 1582, the Julian calendar was now out of sync by 10 days. And so what did they figure out? Well, we need a better calendar. And so enter now Pope Gregory. Right? Pope Gregory the 13th in 1582 decided that he's going to change the calendar to get better on track and to stay consistent over time. And so he reduced the average number of days from 365 and a quarter days in the Julian calendar to 365 to a little more than 0.24 days. This was first adopted because he was Pope in the Catholic countries in Europe, but then ultimately some of the Protestant countries adopted it, and so did the Eastern Orthodox countries. So on Thursday, October 4th, 1582, by adding the 10 days, the next day was not October 5th, but October 15th, 1582. And during this transition, we now had the old calendar in use by some countries, the Julian calendar, which was known as Old Style, OS, and then we had the Gregorian calendar, which is the New Style, NS calendar. This is where it starts to affect us as genealogists. Here is a copy of a Warsaw marriage certificate from 1907, when the administration of Warsaw was Russian. It was part of the Russian Empire. And so the date that's on this document says that the day for this marriage certificate is November/December, and the date is the 23rd/the 6th. So what do we have here? We have a dual dated document. Okay, and it's not because this person was married over this long period of time, but because we're going to show the Julian date and the Gregorian date. Here's another example. This is an obelisk on the burial place for Thomas Jefferson. And when Thomas Jefferson was born in 1743, there was no United States. Virginia was a colony of England, and England had not yet adopted the new calendar. And so on the bottom of his obelisk, we can actually see that he was born April 2nd, 1743, Old Style, Julian calendar, but then when he died July 4th, 1826, New Style, right? So we've got both calendars represented on this on his place of death. So what about that Gregorian calendar rules? Now, some of this is going to be, you may remember this from the year 2000, the Y2K issue, but every year that is exactly divisible by 4 is a leap year, right? We're still going to use that 4-year cycle, 3 normal years, 1 leap year. Okay, but we know that that's not going to work out because we're going to just get out of sync over time. So there's an exception. Except for years that are exactly divisible by 100. All right? If it's divisible by 100, it is not going to be a leap year. Okay, so we have a rule and we have one exception. But I got another exception for you. If any of those years that's divisible by 100 is divisible by 400, then it's going to be a leap year. Well, that's a lot. But if you remember the year 2000, that meant that the year 2000, which was divisible by 100, making it not a leap year, but it was divisible by 400, making it a leap year, Y2K was a leap year. So 1700, 1800, and 1900 are not leap years, but the years 1600 and 2000 were leap years. Here is a listing of countries and regions that adopted the Gregorian calendar over time. So starting with 1582, we saw that it was adopted in Italy and the Catholic countries, including France. We'll see that in a minute, why that's important. But then you see some of the German states come in the 1600s and 1700s, England in 1752, and then it's only the 1900s that you see some of the Eastern European countries adopt the Gregorian calendar. So when you get a document that has a date on it, it would be important to know what calendar are you using for that date. You might be surprised that it would be a different date, even though the day that's on the document could have been exactly right. And you can see Saudi Arabia here didn't change their calendar until 2016. Depending when you did that transition from the old Julian to the Gregorian calendar, meant how many days you had to account for in the difference between the transitions. So going back to 1582, it was a 10-day difference, right? We saw that we added 10 days to the calendar, and the next day was just 10 days later. But if you were to start to do that in the 1900s, like some of those Eastern European countries, you would have had to add 13 days to get into sync. Now, some of you may know that I work on Jewish Gen's Jobar burial registry project, and you may be wondering, have I ever seen some strange dating on submissions from some of these countries that are going through a transition? And you would be right. There was one that particularly stuck out in my memory, and I thought I'd show you that. This is the Portuguese cemetery in Villette, France. The cemetery closed in 1810, so it wasn't open all that long. But it was open during the time there was the French Revolution. Now, during the French Revolution, the people changed a lot of the normal customs and ceremonies, and they completely redid the calendar. They came up with a French revolutionary calendar. It was only used during the period of time that the revolution was intact, between 1793 and 1805. They completely renamed all the months. They started with year 1 all over again, and they even changed the length of the week to a 10-day week. You know, you can make the week anything you want. It's the only measure of time on the calendar that isn't in relationship to the astronomical movement of the sun or the moon or the earth or something like that. So in this spreadsheet, we have for each individual person a date of death that's being represented in 3 different calendars. We have the English calendar, which is the Gregorian calendar. We have the Republican calendar, which is the French Revolutionary calendar. And we have the Hebrew calendar, which is based on the Hebrew modified lunar calendar, right? All these dates are the date of death, just represented differently. When I was going through this little presentation, I found 2 interesting things that I thought you might like to see. Was there ever a February 30th? We know that the 29th is a leap year, but what about the 30th? Well, believe it or not, going back to Sweden again, they decided that they didn't want to add all 10 days and go from one calendar to the next. They were going to do it gradually. So they were going to take those extra leap year days and they were going to omit them until they got to the right place. But what happened was they experienced what was known as the Great Northern War, and they were kind of preoccupied with the war and just forgot to make the adjustments in 1704 and 1708. So when they got to 1712, the next leap year, they decided, you know what, this is not working out. Why don't we just go back to the Julian calendar? But they added a day to February, and because 1712 was a leap year, which meant that it had 29 days, they added the day to February, and they got February 30th. Voila. Right? February 30th, 1712. Finally, they decided this isn't working out either, so we're just going to convert to the Gregorian calendar in 1753. February 17th was followed by March 1st, and they caught up to everybody else. Now, what about February 31st? Well, if you've seen my presentation on the importance of cemetery research, where I show you a whole bunch of headstones, you may have seen this one. And I ask people to take a look and tell me if they see anything unusual there. And of course, after a while, you notice that the date on this stone is February 31st, 1869. Now, this is not a leap year. This is what I would call a super leap year, but clearly people knew that the 31st was not a real date in February. And so when I was doing this presentation, the research for this presentation, I found that in some cases, they would use February 31st on a stone just to show that they didn't know the actual date of death. That seems a little strange to me. They could have just put 1869 if they wanted to, but they decided to use February 31st. So hopefully this has been another helpful video from the Jewish Genealogy Society of Long Island. Please visit our website at www.jgsli.org for more information on our monthly speakers, beginners workshop, and other projects and resources. And visit our Facebook page where you can take part in conversations with experienced researchers. Whether you're on Long Island or you're an out-of-towner, we'd love to hear from you. Good luck with your research.